It all began on December 24th, Christmas Eve, 1971. LANSA Flight 508 took off late from the international airport in Lima, Peru. Their destination was Iquitos, another Peruvian city. In the first 30 minutes, everything was normal. The trip was calm, and they had crossed the Andes at 7,000 meters high in good weather. They had made the report when they flew over Ollón in the Lima mountains. But half an hour later, the atmosphere changed. They were flying over the Amazon area and the clouds were getting darker. Suddenly, a thunderstorm and strong turbulence began to occur. The plane lost altitude to 6,000 meters and began to shake a lot, triggering panic among the passengers. The storm that had developed was of the cumulonimbus type, with intense electrical activity which caused the plane to be subjected to great shaking. At this moment, a flight attendant said through the loudspeakers, "Dear passengers, we inform you that the area of turbulence we're going through is due to a significant storm over the Amazon jungle. Fasten seatbelts." The shaking and banging became increasingly violent and hand luggage fell out of the compartments. The plane descended 4,000 meters and the pilot was looking for denser air to make an emergency landing. At 12:36, lightning struck the plane on the right wing and set the fuel tank on fire. The fire caused a general structural failure, and from the explosion, the plane split into two. Among the 92 travelers was Juliane Koepcke, only 17 years old. The young woman was finishing her studies in Lima, and her parents, both zoologists, were working on a study of wildlife in the heart of the Amazon jungle. The day before the flight, her mother, Maria, had gone to Lima to meet her daughter. In this way, the two would fly together to Pucallpa to meet her father, who was waiting for them there to celebrate Christmas together. That December 24th, the airport was full of people who wanted to get home to their relatives soon. Mother and daughter were happy to be reunited, although Maria was quite nervous since she didn't like flying. When they showed up at the counter, they were informed that the flight was delayed. So mother and daughter sat down to wait. Shortly after, they saw an Electra turboprop approaching down the runway. The plane was ready and the passengers began to board to take off towards Pucallpa. The flight would last 1 hour. Juliane chose seat 19F because she liked to ride next to the window and watch the scenery. As the sky darkened, the turbulence increased and lightning began to be seen illuminating the interior from the windows. People began to scream in despair. Lightning couldn't stop being seen around the plane. Juliane herself said in an interview, "I saw a bright light on the right wing. The lightning struck the engine, but the wing didn't explode. My mother told me, 'It's the end.' And after that, everything was very calm. And then, everything exploded." After several days of searching, Peruvian authorities announced the death of all travelers, a total of 92 people, including 86 passengers and 6 crew members. However, the announcement was made without having found all of the deceased. When the people were ejected from a height of 3,000 meters, the remains of the aircraft and the deceased had fallen in different places and at great distances, but not all are lost. At the time of the accident, Juliane was ejected from the plane. She stated that the plane split in two in front of her, and suddenly she could only hear the wind in her ears. She was still holding onto her seat by the belt. Her mother and the man sitting next to her had been kicked out of their seats. She felt herself going down in free fall, and then she lost consciousness. She fell on the tops of the trees, whose branches and dense vegetation cushioned the impact to the ground. She was unconscious for about 3 hours, and when she woke up the next morning, she looked at her watch, which was still working, and read 9. She was on the ground, touching the earth, surrounded by jungle, and still tied to her seat. The fact that she had fallen with her chair and that it fell on the thick vegetation saved her life. Well, if it hadn't been like that, all the blows would have hit her. Then Juliane looked around, and next to her there were only remains of bodies on the plane. I woke up sitting in the same seat, as if starting another trip, but this time to hell. There were 3 dismembered bodies around me. I thought it was a nightmare and I went back to sleep for a few moments. When I thought I came to, I choked when I saw that it was real. Remains of corpses hung from the trees, iron, seats, clothes and suitcases scattered throughout the jungle. Also smoke. A lot of smoke. Something extremely difficult and incredible had happened, and that is that despite the height at which she had been shaken from the plane, Juliane had only minimal injuries. A cut on her arm, a wound on her shoulder, black eyes, and broken clavicle. She looked for her mother and shouted for her, but the only thing she found were charred remains of the plane and more corpses of passengers. Juliane herself described the area as gloomy Christmas trees, since gifts carried by passengers were hung from the trees as well as pieces of dismembered people. As if that weren't enough, she had also lost her glasses and had vision problems, so she couldn't see accurately. She was completely alone. Among the deceased passengers, she found a bag with candies and sweets that were her only source of food for the rest of her days in the jungle. She only had her summer dress and a sandal. Juliane saw rescue planes and helicopters in the area, but her attempts to attract attention were in vain. In that accident, one of the most important search operations in the history of Peru was carried out. However, due to the density of the Amazon, those in charge of carrying out the rescue couldn't detect all the remains of the plane or locate all the victims. After a while, Juliane stopped hearing the planes and helicopters and realized that she had been presumed dead. But the young woman wouldn't give up. She would cling to life and try to survive at all costs. Few days later, she discovered to her horror the corpses of some passengers, a row of 3 seats with their occupants still clinging, anchored and buried in the earth up to their waists, with their feet up. Through tears, she remembered the advice her father had given her, who had taught her tricks on how to find her way in an unknown place. Juliane probably never imagined finding herself in a similar situation, but thanks to this, she began to follow the course of a stream, hoping that it would lead her to large rivers where people could live. In some sections, she had to swim because there was a certain depth. The survivor also said that she had to swim near crocodiles and that they didn't attack her. Thanks to the knowledge that her parents had passed on to her, the young woman knew that the snakes were camouflaged under dry leaves. So as she moved forward, she threw her only sandal forward to detect dangerous vipers. They were very hard days, in which she had to face unbearable heat, mosquito bites, and the danger of a wild animal appearing. She continued on her way, looking for a way out. What Juliane didn't know was that she was more than 600 kilometers from any inhabited center in the heart of the Peruvian Amazon. As for her injuries, the only one that worried her was one on her arm. It wasn't large or very serious, but flies had laid their eggs there, and maggots had hatched under her skin. Fearing possible amputation, she thought about removing them. But that wasn't an easy task. She tried to do it with a ring that was open on one side, pressing on the skin, but the hole was too deep. She also tried with a branch, but she was also unsuccessful, and in the end, she continued on her way. After 10 days of walking through the jungle, she finally reached a navigable river and walked along the shore until she found a motor boat and a cabin, which served as a refuge for hunters. She thought she was dreaming. She couldn't believe that it was real. She didn't want to steal the boat, so she waited several hours until the owners arrived back. There she found some fuel in a container. She remembered that on one occasion, her father had disinfected a dog's wound with maggots by pouring a little kerosene into it. So she did the same with her wound. That was very painful, but also effective, and made a good part of the worms come to the surface. More relieved, she decided to rest in that cabin. The next morning, 3 Peruvian men who sometimes passed through that place found her in the shelter. They took her to their village, where they gave her food and treated her most serious injuries. The men confessed that when they found her, her appearance and condition were so bad that they thought she was some kind of ghost or spirit. The next day, Juliane was taken by boat for several hours to the town of Tornavista, where she was flown to Pucallpa to be admitted to a hospital. There, she met with her father, who couldn't contain his emotion at finding his daughter alive, who, given the situation, had been presumed dead. Juliane's instructions helped find the wreckage of the plane. They found the front part almost intact, and based on the evidence found, they were able to verify that 13 passengers had survived the fall of the plane, including the pilot and her mother. However, badly injured by the blows, they died days after the accident. More than 50 years have passed since this event, and it is still difficult to understand how Juliane survived. Fortunately, a series of events allowed her to be a survivor of that terrible tragedy. She survived a fall of thousands of meters and found herself alone in the middle of the Amazon in an area far from civilization. Juliane developed a deep fear of flying and for many years suffered constant nightmares about the tragedy. She later graduated in biology from the University of Kiel in Germany and received her doctorate. In 1998, 27 years after the tragedy, she returned to the Amazon. She did so accompanied by German filmmaker Werner Herzog to film the documentary Wings of Hope that tells and relieves her incredible story. During her flight with the director, Juliane had the courage to sit once again in seat 19F. Curiously, the filmmaker was going to be one of the passengers on the crashed plane, but he missed the flight, and thanks to that, he's alive. The woman stated that the experience of recording the documentary was therapeutic. It was the first time she had forced herself to return to the scene of the accident, and in a way have a sense of closure that she had never achieved before. In 2011, she wrote her memoirs about her incredible survival experience in a book titled When I Fell from the Sky. At the Peruvian airport, there is a monument that remembers the tragedy. A map carved in stone showing the location where the Lockheed Electra fell, and with a line showing the path Juliane took through the jungle parallel to a river. At the bottom, an inscription, Wings of Hope. In the back, there are rectangular niches with their plaques and small photos in which 60 of the victims of the plane crash rest. In her adult life, Juliane chose to live in Germany, specializing in mammalogy, and specifically in the study of bats. She currently lives in Switzerland and works as a librarian at the Bavarian State Zoological Collection. In addition, she dedicates her time to the Panguana Foundation, with which she protects natural areas and promotes scientific research. Did you know about this amazing and incredible event? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, and if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!